Gisondi. I teach journalism at Eastern Illinois University, so my background is embedded a lot in journalism. As a matter of fact, most of it is sports. As Billy mentioned yesterday, I have a textbook or field guide for coverage sports, so it's used across the country, and how to do that. I still do some editing and freelance writing in that area. But Bigfoot has always been the topic that's fascinated me ever since I was a little kid. I'm old down and what have you. So my mom used to get that. You know, I grew up in New Jersey the first 15 years of my life, and then lived in Florida for 24. In New Jersey, my father used to talk about all the Jersey Devil and all of those different characters there. My father built pools in remote areas. And he never saw anything, but he was always fascinated, which is probably why I was equally fascinated by the topic. So anyway, through the years, I kept coming back to this topic, wondering, what is this about? I've never seen Bigfoot. I may have, after talking to researchers, heard something that may have been, because I spent a lot of time hiking and camping. In Florida, I've hiked and camped through most of that state. I've hiked and camped a lot through the south, because we used to get out of that heat in Florida. So we would go all over the different places, and I love being out in the woods. It's where I feel at home, much more than, even though I grew up outside New York than the city. I like cities and I love the woods. So I was, again, fascinated with this, and then suddenly one day I was looking for a writing project for graduate. I went back to school for another degree, and I went, I should like learn about Bigfoot. And I started doing more and more research about this, and it's a topic that, like I mentioned, was fascinating, but more so, I want to believe that Bigfoot exists. Although we were talking last night, Larry and several others, talking like, do I really want to see a Bigfoot? I don't know. I don't know if I really want to see some 1,000 or 15-pound creature coming up to me at some point, and you know, you never know what's going to happen. So the book that I wrote was not about me, though. I wrote it in first person, but it was about my experiences with people, but it was really about the researchers. That's where I got to meet some really great people like Billy and others out on the field. I'd go on some expeditions with them, and I'd write about each of those expeditions. But as I was doing that, I was doing research on the areas. And so some of the places we went, the Yohari, the mountains down in North Carolina, the Wachitas. There's a big conference coming up in the next month or two out in Oklahoma. I've been out in the Wind River Mountains with Dr. Jeff Meldrum and John Mazinski. I've been to a bunch of different places, including back in my home, sort of adopted home state of Florida, the Green Swamp, which is huge. My wife was a biologist in the state, so I've gotten to know that area a whole lot more too. So that's sort of the background of what I did for this book. I wanted this book to be about the people who were searching for Bigfoot, not about whether or not Bigfoot exists, because I have nothing to say on it. I've learned to have something to say from talking to the different people. What I wrote about is why the people searched for Bigfoot, what drove them, and also about the areas where people were searching. Because one thing I found that was interesting is that when I started doing research on different areas, particularly the Uharis, I don't know if anybody's been in that part of North Carolina, just a beautiful area, I couldn't believe how many ghost story books there were from about that area. I also didn't realize that's where the first gold rush in the United States was. As a matter of fact, I was told to be careful as we were searching in our expedition in the Uharis not to fall in a mine shaft, because they were still there. And those of you who are nodding know that there's a whole lot of them out in that area. So when we were going through there, that was a concern. So what I was going to do today is talk about some of the experiences and what people who search for Bigfoot, the things I've learned. And as because going into this, I did not have any sort of stereotype. But being a journalist for most of my life, I realized that, you know, people are people, and as soon as you believe someone's like something, they're completely not. You know, people like the stereotype. So when I told people I was working on this book, or actually since it's been out, people are fascinated by this topic, as you all know, and that's why you're here today. But the stereotype is that it's a bunch of people who are not very bright, living in some backwoods, who are finding Bigfoot or claiming that Bigfoot exists. And if you're here, you've probably done some reading on this topic, and you realize nothing could be further from the truth. The people that I went out with, even in my first expedition, that was in the Ouachita Mountains down in Oklahoma. One woman was the CEO of a bank in Cincinnati. You know, you've got people who are principals. You've got police officers. You've got I've come across, you know, people who are doctors. As a matter of fact, there is one, I don't know if the person's here, there was a person I talked to about a month or two ago who's a physician in West Virginia and does some research up in that area. So it's all shapes and sizes. And there's not a whole lot, you know, people say there's not a whole lot of people with science background doing anything in this field. Well, there aren't a lot of people with doctors. I mean, Jeff Meldon, who's, you know, does at Idaho State, is brilliant in the area that he's in. And there are other people. There's someone he does research with, John Gisondi. I'll talk a little bit about him in a little bit. Is just, I find John to be just a brilliant man. And he's got his bachelor's degree, but he's like an old-fashioned William Bartram type scientist. Just a great, great guy. So there are some people with science background. But I also come across a lot of people like Harold Benny, a guy down in southern Illinois. People I talk to in Illinois, when you think about Illinois, you think about Chicago. You don't think about downstate. When I moved there 14 years ago, that's how I thought. I thought everything was like Chicago, and I realized it's Chicago, and the rest of the state's like Kansas. You know, it's really not as deeply populated as in the northern part. And if you ever go down to the Shawnee National Forest, that's as remote as you're going to find in a lot of different areas there. So the people came from all types of different professions, all kinds of different backgrounds. A couple of things I did notice is that, one, there weren't nearly as many females actively doing research. That's changed a little bit since then. Just to let you know, I had an eye injury about 3 years ago, so I don't have my contacts in right now. So if I mention somebody and you're here, I can't see you until you're about 8 steps away to the face. I see you, I just sometimes see face. Is Melissa here? Well, Melissa Hovey, she's someone who's out in the field that I went on an expedition with her. She's out there, but there's not a whole lot of female expeditions. There's also not a whole lot of people who are minorities that are doing expeditions. From my experiences and the people I've talked to. I also didn't realize how many research organizations, now I know, but at the beginning, how many research organizations there are all across the country who are actively doing it. But here's something I've learned through the years of doing this. I started this project probably 2006. Is that I see a lot of research groups get together, really excited, and then lose interest. For whatever reason. It's a lot to think about this. This is a lot of people, it's more than a full-time job for them. They're doing it nonstop, or at least a part-time job. There's an awful lot of work out there. So those are some of the observations that I've noticed along the way. I put it all in a book called Monster Trek, The Obsessive Search for Bigfoot. And just to let you know, I'm not a real good salesman. I'm a writer and a teacher, so I didn't know what to do. First time using my publisher sends books to different places. I've got some in the back there if you're interested. But in the book there, I talk about a lot of this experience. So what I was going to do here is talk about a couple of the experiences that really jumped out, and talk about some of the people involved. And then if you have further questions, we can talk about it. Or believe me, I can talk forever, but you don't want to sit there forever listening to me talk. What? You've done worse, okay. Well, in the Ouachita Mountains, this is not far from the folk monster down in Arkansas. I think we were a couple hours away, something like that. And my first experience was driving 13, 14 hours straight through from central Illinois to Oklahoma, the state I had never been in. I've been in a lot of states, but I've never been there. And showing up in the middle of the night with a walkie-talkie trying to track people down. This was a BFRO expedition. At the time, they charged $300 to go on an expedition. And then after that, you could go on for free. But now I think they charge on every single one there. Normally, I would not have paid that, but I thought, well, I need to meet people. I need to go out there. I need to find out what's going on in the field. I'll pay it. I can just take it off of my taxes. So I went out there. And I have read an awful lot about Matt Moneymaker. And I write about him several times in books. I went on a couple of different expeditions. And most of it negative. My experiences with him were not negative, mostly. As a matter of fact, he was, that night, he and I, my first time out there, we were out there, I had to follow him in I had an SUV at the time. He says, just follow me down this road in the middle of the night. And I'm driving down roads, I didn't know where I was going, flying. I stayed right in this bumper. Not until the next day that I realized how many cliffs and other stuff were on the side there. But the thing that people ask, have I ever seen Bigfoot? And I don't think I have. But if I did, I saw it that night. The reason I'm saying is, I'm not sure what I saw. Because you know when you look at clouds, you see things in there. You look at trees and structures, you think you see what you want to see, or it's just like a dream where I think your experiences of the day impact what you're seeing, so you're not sure. And that's why a lot of witnesses I've talked to who've seen Bigfoot want to see Bigfoot again, because they're not sure they really saw what they saw. So, I'm there, we're sitting in the middle of nowhere, everybody else is at different spots. And Matt decides to take a smoke break, says, almost chucks me this $10,000, night vision here. Why don't you look around, see what you can see? And I'm like, okay. So I'm looking around, and probably from here to the tree line over there, I see what I believe to be some creature sitting there like this, looking straight at me. And I'm looking at going, there's no way in hell the first time I'm looking in the woods I'm seeing Bigfoot. So Matt's sitting there, I'm like, do I say this to Matt? Do I tell him, hey, I see Bigfoot? Well, if I do say that and there's nothing there, I suddenly look like some crazy guy. If I don't, then we've lost an opportunity. But I'm just sitting there and I'm just looking. It's still burnished in my brain. And again, I don't know if I saw it or not. So I said, hey Matt, come here for a second. It's probably nothing. I'm trying to preface it with all this. But I think I see something in that tree line. So I give him the camera. He looks, he doesn't see, gives it back to me, and I don't see what I saw. Well, that could be one of either two things. It could be that something was there and left, or the cloud looks different to me. And that was my first introduction to actually doing all of these different research. And that's really what drove me in this book, is that I don't promote whether Bigfoot exists or doesn't exist. Like I mentioned, I want it to exist. If you talk to police officers, they'll tell you the most compelling evidence is eyewitness testimony. They'll also tell you the worst evidence is eyewitness testimony. And I find that to be true with the people that I've talked to here. And there's all kinds of, last night when several of us were talking, I'm hearing stories, and the more I hear stories, I don't discount what people see in any way, shape, or form. But I don't know that people know exactly what they saw. And I hope to goodness, and again, I'm not saying that I don't disbelieve it. I just don't know. I wasn't there. I want it to happen. I want it to go through there. So anyway, in North Carolina, I realized very early on that if you get about 15, 20, 30 people out in the woods trying to find a creature that's been elusive for thousands of years, you're finding nothing. But there's something that, a lot of times people weren't trying to find things. As the researchers in this area who know far more about this than I do will tell you, you're not necessarily trying to capture or tackle some creature. Well, you're probably not going to do that anyway if Bigfoot's out there. You're trying to find some sort of evidence. You're trying to find something. Whether it's a recording. There's one person I was hanging around with that still does, I don't know if he still does, but he was doing a lot of recordings. He could tell you probably any animal out there, what he was listening to, what he was hearing. He knew all of those different things. And maybe, Larry deals with animals all the time. He knows that far better than I do. But they're trying to capture something out there. But our expedition one day was just driving and running in all different directions. I'm going, please, I could hide from people that are doing that. But there was something that happened at that expedition that really gave me pause. There was I mentioned a woman who was the CEO of a bank in Cincinnati. This woman grew up actually near me, down in Naples and Fort Myers, Florida. But she would regularly in Cincinnati go out to the woods, just on her own with her dog. And when she was out there in the woods with the dog, in remote places, searching for Bigfoot, which she was a tough person. She was really tough. As a matter of fact, a couple times she said her dog came running into the tent. When they were just sitting in there together, and she believed she heard some things out there. She was not afraid of anything. She was really tough. Far tougher than me. When I was out in the field the first night, I didn't want to be at an eye shot of somebody going, I don't want to get picked off. So she's telling me all these different stories. And then the last night I was there for 3 days, 2 nights. They decide, hey, let's put Pam out in the middle of the woods in a tent. Because Bigfoot is more inclined to go near somebody who's a female. That was the theory that was posited while we were in there. And we were in a real remote area, and they said, hey, that's a great idea. So, and again, I didn't know any better one way or the other. I was probably a quarter-mile away from her. I was the second closest to her. And suddenly on the walkie-talkies, we start hearing her voice go up. And she started getting really uptight. And after knowing her, as a journalist, you sort of have an idea if people are telling you the truth or not. You can't always guess. I mean, Ernest Hemingway used to call it a bullshit detector as a journalist. You can sort of tell. I could tell she was not someone who was going to make things up or fabricate anything. She was somebody who wanted to find out what's going on. And when I heard her voice go up, I started getting concerned for her because she was upset about something. Then she starts seeing, she said, these large red eyes. The tent was roughly around here, and before the back of the wall, there was a little hill, and she saw, she said, several sets of red eyes. And things started getting thrown at her, and got really close. And that's when everybody started saying, okay, let's run in. The first person there was a medic. He happened to be a medic, took her pulse, I think it was, I don't know, heart rate was like 180 or 200 or something like that at least. And I got there, I sprinted out there, and I got there, I don't know, within a minute or two, a couple of minutes I'm there. And she was just almost panting and breathless, and it was not the same person who had gotten known the previous 2 days. And she was just completely shaken by this. Someone who's used to going out in the woods. Around that, right before that time, and a little after that time, one of the guys I was with started having some pebbles thrown at him as well. One bounced off the tree and came near me. And although I'm not, I was like, what was that? Because I'm having little pebbles or something. So I'm like, why? Because again, I knew more than most people, but I didn't know near enough that I ended up knowing later on about any of these things at all. And I started, are you kidding me? What's going on? People started walking, and the next day apparently people saw I had to shoot back the next day because I was coaching my daughter's softball team, so I had to drive all the way through the night. But in those 3 days, it was kind of interesting getting to know the folks out there. And immediately I realized it was a big group of people, and that and I was convinced Pam may have seen something. She wasn't someone. She knew the woods. She knew what was going on. Unfortunately, she ended up dying about 6 or 7 years after that of some blood disease. It was also the first expedition and the first experience I had of people bringing up, there's all kinds of different theories. All kinds of different theories. And I know in this group of people, there are people who know a lot, the people who are just sort of interesting. And I talked a little bit about in the book, but I mean, just sort of, the theory that really jumped out then was they have like an infrared and that they can make you get uptight, and there's certain animals that have that as well. And later on, people were telling me that she got zapped, which is one of the terms there, several times, and some were saying, well, she probably got that disease because of that. There's all kinds of theories. As a journalist, unless I have facts, I'm not going to say this is real. But there's all kinds of theories out there that some are interesting. And again, I would defer to the people who know animals and biology more than I. I mean, my experience, whenever I had a question with the biology, I would talk to experts in the field or things like that. And my wife, being a biologist, was very helpful as well. Well, then the next one I went on was one in North Carolina, the O'Hara's Mountains, and it was kind of interesting. And we had all kinds of amazing people that were there. I found the landscape to be really fascinating. We saw what we believed to, well, I didn't know if it was or not, but people saw structures, what they believed to be structures in an area. And there was also I don't know if anybody's seen the video of in night, it looks like something's crawling in the Ori Mountains and grabs that candy bar. Well, I was with him at this expedition, and I know exactly where he put those things. So we talked at great length about that. Although the takeaway from that trip, one of the biggest ones for me is they said, hey, we're going to go get some, go to a slaughterhouse and get a bunch of blood and smear it someplace out here, see what we can pull in. And I'm thinking, brother, if you pull something with that blood, I don't want to see what's coming in. I don't want to be there. I don't want to know what kind of creature is coming in wants to come after that kind of blood. But they did that. There's all kinds of different things. Everybody's struggling to try to find some way to get that. As a matter of fact, Mike had put some candy bars out there before to get that out. I think that's what he had that night. Down in Florida, I spent 24 years living in Florida. I moved there when I was about 15 years old, as I mentioned. I lived there. The Green Swamp is huge. How many people have been in the Florida swamps or the areas? Okay, so few know it. When you're in there, it's a completely different setting. Like I live in East Central Illinois right now, and there's not a whole lot of anything. You know, we don't have bears. We don't really have any poisonous snakes. If they are, it just happen to get in the area. In Florida, you have all of those things. You know, I was regularly, my wife one time saved a 6-foot grappler because she didn't want anybody to kill it. She's a biologist. So she grabbed that and put it in her suitcase and drove it, you know, an hour and a half away. And, you know, whereas I would, sadly, I probably would have driven over it. But this construction crew was about to kill it. She goes, "Oh, you're not going to kill that snake." And he's like, "Well, take it an hour away." She goes, "I will." She threw her clothes out of it and threw it in the suitcase and drove it up to Gainesville from Orlando area. No, I already do that. So Florida has all kinds of things. I still cannot get over looking in the water and seeing a log and not thinking it's a gator, because they're all over. I also, when I hike, and I love hiking, but I'm always looking down, because I've been around, you know, in Florida you have, you know, the water moccasins which come after you. You have eastern diamondback rattlers that are huge. You have the pygmy rattlers, you've got coral snakes, you've got all kinds of snakes all over the place down there. So, and of course now they've got some of the bigger snakes that have been invasive, that have come from South America and going in there. But I ended up going with a group out there. It's outside Dade City, where actually they used to have the rattlesnake roundup for many years, right in that area. So I knew there were snakes, but that didn't bother me. There were spiders all over. One day I was sitting down we were taking a trek out there, and lots of spiders, and I was fascinated by them. I found out that there's probably in that area about 2.5 million spiders per square mile in that area. And I asked this guy at Florida State, I said, "So how many would there be where I live?" He goes, "Oh, about like 250,000 in the air." And he's been to a place that had 4 million in England, and I'm thinking that. And there's spiders. I mean, if you don't like bugs, don't go to Florida in any way. They're all over the place. They're just part of the environment. So I went with a group that was exploring, included one woman, Caroline Solomon, who passed away about a year ago, she was all of about, I don't know, 5'5", about 120 soaking wet, and she'd go out into the woods on her own in these swamps, just looking around. She was part Native American. She knew all the people involved there. So she was one of the leaders of this group there. And it was in this little area perched. You had cow pastures all around. You had lakes and rivers and all kinds of things. But it was some really thick area there. So we went walking all through the different areas there. And if you're walking in there, I found in a lot of these expeditions, my main concern was not Bigfoot. Figure if Bigfoot's out there wants to pick me off, he's going to. You know, the big thing that you're worried about is alligators and all these other different animals that I'm talking about. Like in Oklahoma, I was far worried about cats and bear than anything else when you're going through there. So that's the one thing that people don't realize is if you're going to go search on your own for Bigfoot, worry about your safety first, about things that you know exist. And again, not discounting that Bigfoot exists, but you know are out there. And then these other things, then you can start worrying about. So the thing that really jumped out on that expedition, besides the fact that I found out when we were pulling in, I saw the place was all beaten up, and I was like, "What is that?" I said, "Oh, wild hogs," which is yet another thing you get to lovely worry about in Florida, and those suckers will take you out. They're big, they're huge. Most of them were deposited there from when Hernando Son and the Spaniards came through, when they went through trying to go out, finding different things through the Mississippi and what have you, they were left behind. But they tore up the whole area there, and I'm thinking, oh, my little tent's not going to protect me from anything. But the last night, Carol Ann said, I would say our camping area is about the size cleared out this conference hall. And all around us was really thick woods and swamps. And if you've ever been near swampy areas, you realize you cannot move quickly through it for a couple of reasons. It's sometimes deep, there's muck, it'll come up to here, there's trees, there's vines, there's everything. You're not going fast through a swamp. No one is. And this one stretched out for miles. In that direction, partially that direction, there were the cow pastures, like I mentioned, around us with the rivers behind us. And we had just been out by one of the rivers through the night. And Carolyn goes, hey, I'll make a call for you. Well, people who go out in the woods are attacked sometimes for not having their cameras ready or their videotapes ready or their audio recorders ready. And I'm always like, yeah, why don't they do that? Well, I did that. She made a call, it was about 2:33 in the morning, and she calls. Makes whatever call. I can't even come close to making a call. If I did it, you'd think I was going crazy right now or something, or I got slapped with a 2x4. She had this call, and suddenly I hear in the distance something that sounded sort of like a hybrid between an owl and an ape. And again, take it for my description for what it is. I'm not a biologist. You can really look and hear exactly, but what I believed to be an owl or an ape. And then I hear another in that direction. And they both start getting louder and closer. And like an idiot, I and others, here's the tree line, I'm right here. You know, with my ear in, like I can hear at 3 in the morning. You know, we're sort of listening and leaning into it. And it started getting so loud and so wide from several directions, it appeared, that at one point I thought it was like from the Planet of the Apes, when they're all just taking off, flying in at you. And I'm just fascinated. And of course, I'm holding a recorder. I've never recorded it. I'm so angry about that to this day. That's the thing I'm angriest about. So I could show it to somebody there. And then, as fast as it started, this probably rumbled. It was almost like something rumbling from two different directions. After about 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds, boom, stops. And it seemed like it was like a couple of feet inside the wood line that it stopped. And I'm going, what the hell is that? Because even I would suspect owls are not going to be that loud. I don't know if they're going to be able to come and just stop that quickly. I mean, there are all these different questions. But it was really, I left there just that night. I almost couldn't sleep that night because I was so excited, thinking, wow, no, maybe I'm right. Maybe there is something out there. But that was really, I don't know that it was smart. I think somebody was saying last night, do you really want us to call in some Bigfoot? I don't know if I did or not. And then when I was out the one time I was supposed to go out twice out west. I was supposed to go out with Cliff for one expedition, but that's when I had my eye injury. But I did go out to the Wind River Mountains. Most of this I kept on everybody thinks of Bigfoot as being in the Pacific Northwest, of course. People here probably know otherwise. But we went to the Wind River Mountains, and I met with, I spent a couple of days with Jeff Meldrum and John Mazinska in the middle of a real remote area, if you've ever been in that area. Just beautiful, beautiful country. And on one of the nights, John and I went up. Jeff was feeling kind of sick that day, so he stayed at the sort of the base camp, and John and I went up and camped. I had like a one-person tent, and he had nothing. He just laid out in the woods. And the thing I thought was fascinating about John is that if you ever have a chance to read anything about John, I talked about some of it, but John is like an old-time scientist. He got his bachelor's degree out in New York and just said, where do I want to live? Boom, picked some place and just moved out there to Wyoming. And
He lives off the grid. He built his own house from wood and stuff on the side and just found a way. He invited my wife and my 2 daughters were with me on this trip, and invited us all into his house and showed how he lived. He was just like, he's an amazing musician. He lives in this area near Lander that's known for having one of the best steakhouses. And in fact, Robert Redford flew into this place, and they said, you need to go talk to John if you want to live off the grid. And then they started chatting about different things. He has journals. I almost feel like he's sort of like this old William Bartram type of a scientist where he's taking notes and everything. Just a really, really brilliant guy. We're walking around, he's talking about all the things that you can live off of. If you boil those up, you get vitamin C. It would taste like crap, but it would keep you alive. And he's doing all these other things, and I was like, man, this guy's like MacGyver. This guy can do anything. Give him some foil and some pine nuts, and he can take over the world. Although on the way up, he said, I hate journalists. I was like, oh great, I'm going up on a mountain in the middle of nowhere with a guy who could kill me probably with a staple. And he's telling me he hates journalists. And he tells me a story about a guy from the LA Times that came out, because he's also the world's leading expert in bighorn sheep. And he had also previously told me, this is how tough this guy is. Or he would even admit, probably, I think he would admit, kind of stupid at the time. He was the person who was on the first grizzly count out in Yellowstone. And there are some grizzly bear going inside these tents. But he was convinced it wasn't to go after people, it was that people were leaving food there. Nowadays, of course, we realize, don't put food in your tent if there's bear around. It just doesn't happen. I just recently I camped a lot out in the Mount Pisgah area there, and we realized keep it in the car, because bear go through there all the time. Well, his way of testing it was, he grabbed a sleeping bag, one of those sort of mummy ones that sort of cover most of your face, jumps in it, goes out in the middle of the woods and just lays down. And he tells this story about it just coming up to him and walking up to him, and this giant, and he says he had a gun in his hand and realized, that's not going to do anything. And if you've been out there, you realize how huge they are. I mean, if you've ever seen a grizzly, one day I was out there in Yellowstone, and I went, wow, why are everybody so fascinated by that buffalo? And I was like, oh, that's a grizzly. They're huge. So he's out there, and all of these different, this grizzly comes up and starts sniffing him, and he's just like, oh my God, this was a smart idea. This huge bear walks around him, doesn't, of course, kill him, goes off. And I go, wow, I survived. I wonder if that was just a freak of nature. Let me try it again tomorrow. And he does this like several times. So this is a guy who's not afraid of things, that could tell you the difference between a chipmunk and a squirrel if he's listening to it. He can tell you all these different berries. As I mentioned, eyewitness testimony is the thing that's really fascinating for me. He told me a story that he believed where he came across a Bigfoot. When he was doing I don't know if at the time he was working for the Park Service or something like that. He grabbed a tent that apparently he found out later someone had spilled bacon grease in it. Yeah, exactly. And he's in the top of a mountain, pretty high up, remote, no one's around. And he was sitting there one night, and he starts hearing something. He starts hearing it, and he says, that breathing is kind of different. So he goes in the tent, and he starts seeing something in the moonlight, and he goes, no. And he's someone who go, nope, not a bear, because a bear has this many breaths and heartbeats per minute. This one has this. He goes, what is that? Because he wasn't thinking Bigfoot. This was years ago. He had sort of heard a story or whatever, didn't think anything of it. Ultimately, he thought it was a bear, so he's like, I'm going to whack it to scare it off. Whacks it, he said, it was like hitting a table. The thing falls in on him. He scrambles to get out of the tent, doesn't see anything there, and he spends most of the rest of the night sitting there with his gun by the fire, having pine cones thrown at him. Pine cones like 20, 30 feet. I mean, I played baseball, I could throw pretty well, but those pine cones, that's tough to throw at a great distance there. And at that point, there were several other people out there who were researchers, who weren't researchers, that worked for the state, that started asking him to research a bunch of different things. And that was his background. He had all these just fascinating stories. So there's all these great people who are out there searching. There's so many questions out there. There's so many different people. One last person is, there's a guy, Don Young, who's in northern Wisconsin. He made his life as a guide. He was a guide. He would bring people in the woods, grew up in the woods, sleep in the woods. He would sleep in the woods as much as you and I would pass out on the couch watching TV. You know, this is somebody who knew the woods really, really well. And he had a couple of encounters where it scared him out. He lives in a place, there's bogs all around. Northern Wisconsin has a whole lot of bogs, all under woods. He said his cats were getting eaten. He has a dog that was half wolf that had its back broken. He showed me some photos, some of which, I'm not expert enough to know if they're good. Some of them look weird, and other ones look like they could certainly be something. But this is someone who knew the woods, and he refused to go out in the woods again until some people, several years later, he decided he was pulled out onto, I think, a BFRO expedition, and ultimately came out, and he's out there actively doing research. As a matter of fact, check him out, Don Young. He just had a book come out about some of his experiences there, if you want to check that out. But he was, I thought, if someone who lives in the woods is scared to be in there, what am I doing there? You know, but he went back out, and he has all kinds. He walked me to a place where he had one. He goes, yeah, I was sitting right here, and I heard that, and he was showing me. And this guy knows the woods and can break everything down. So lots of really interesting people out there, and you start realizing that there's remote areas in every state. I think there's been Bigfoot in every encounters or reports in every state except for Hawaii. I'm thinking, who doesn't want to be in Hawaii? You know, I don't understand that part. It used to be also Rhode Island was very small. But here's something else I found out about reports. When I first moved to Illinois, I'm like, oh, there's not a whole lot of reports in Illinois. A bunch of prairie, a bunch of different farmland, a bunch of other things going on there. And I thought, oh, there's not a whole lot of reports here. Then, of course, you go to southern Illinois, down in the Shawnee National Forest and that whole area, where it's huge. As a matter of fact, I was telling someone last night, there's so many snakes down in that area. There's a road called Rattlesnake Road, that there's limestone caverns up along the hills, and there's swamps down there. I think there's 3 or 4 different living environments there, desert and wetlands and everything, that certain times of the year you can see all the snakes going up into the limestone, and one of the rangers told me, yeah, it's like spaghetti out there. That's how many snakes are out there, all over the place. And but there weren't a whole lot of reports in Florida outside of that area. But I found out that probably the best, I don't know if best is the right word, but certainly the one that has the most information is the BFRO database. That one, suddenly Illinois started getting locked. We went from being towards the bottom towards the top. And I'm finding out that certain states have more reports because they have more active people writing reports about it. So when someone's active, that makes one state more than the other. Like, I don't know if Ohio has as many as compared to others, but I've never seen a state that has more active organizations than Ohio. There's a lot of them now, a lot of them. Of course, it's that home of one of the longest running Bigfoot conferences that Don Keating had started as well. And I think Mark started Mark to work or something like that. So those numbers kept fluctuating in the time that I was going in there, and I realized it's because it depends which state has the most active people in there. In part, not totally, in part. So, questions you guys have at this point? Yes, sir.
Sir, where were you in Florida when you were describing that one area again?
The area?
I mean, about geographically, about in the middle of Florida?
Sure. The Green Swamp is connected, little areas there. It's on the central north part. It's about an hour and a half north of Tampa. But the Green Swamp actually is in that area, but it also goes all the way down into Lakeland and Polk County, in the central part of the state, and Haines City and Claremont, and there's little pockets there that'll eventually get you connecting to the Ocala National Forest, which has all
kind
kinds
of
of...
close, going up toward the Crystal River, kind of going east, northeast, a little bit like that.
Yeah, and it's so large that you can't just say it's in one area, but it's up around that area as well. Absolutely. Absolutely. Other questions? About anything? Okay. I don't know if that's good or bad. If you do have other questions, let me know. As I mentioned, I've got some books back there if you want them. be glad to talk to you some more about any of the topics here, but of course you have a lot of other tremendous speakers here. Yes, sir?
Your wife is a biologist, right?
Yes.
What does she think?
She thinks it's all a bunch of hoo-ha. But keep in mind, she's also grew up in Rhode Island, where there's self-determination and everything. If I don't see it, and she reluctantly believes that there's probably life on other planets.
Lots of stuff.
Yeah, she says, but she disputes that they're here, that anybody's visited here. So, I mean, she's a real old-time scientist too, but she wants to see it. She's since become a heart and cath nurse in Illinois, but yeah, she does not, if she doesn't see it, she doesn't mind theories and people searching it. She says that's fine, but until she has some evidence of it. So, she and I will have a really bad encounter while on our hiking expedition, because next year she wants to go hike the Appalachian Trail. So when we do that, I'm bringing a bazooka. Yeah, so